Well, greetings and welcome. If you're here, hopefully it is because you are a future elementary educator and you are learning about the mathematics that elementary educators teach. This is the beginning of our look at algebraic concepts, and we study algebraic concepts because algebra is about patterns and structures, and we're going to study patterns and structures right at the beginning of our course. Our very first lesson in the course is about variables. And so if we're going to talk about variables, we should probably distinguish variables from something that is not a variable. So let's talk about what a variable is by contrasting it with something like a constant. Constants are numbers. Constants have a fixed value. Constants are things like 3 and pi and the square root of 2 and -4. Their value is what their value is, and it does not change no matter what the context is. By contrast, a variable stands for an unknown. It is some quantity that we do not know everything about, but we might know some relationships about that quantity. Variables can generalize patterns, and variables can take on different values at different times. This brings up the famous comic that you may have seen online where the student says to the algebra teacher, hey, wait a minute, yesterday x was 2. How can x be something other than 2 today? Um, Variables are things like n or x or p. They are, or sometimes it's a smiley face or a rainbow. Pretty much any symbol can be a variable depending on the context. I also want to describe for us the difference between an expression and an equation. There are expressions and there are equations. An expression is a quantity containing variables and or constants. These are things like x plus 2 or 5n or 7. These are expressions. They are quantities, they contain variables, and maybe constants. What's important here, there's no equal sign, there's no equal sign, there's no equal sign. So none of these are solvable the way equations are solvable. An equation is a statement that two expressions are equal. When we take two expressions and say they are equal, that is an equation. When we write x plus 2 equals 7, that is an equation. You can tell because it has an equal sign, and this is the sort of thing that we solve. When we talk about solving, we mean we're looking for the value of the variable that makes the equation true. Okay, let's talk a little bit about patterns if we can. So do this in the privacy of your own home. Take a number, any number, and add 3 to that number, and then double the result, and then subtract 2, and then divide that result by 2. Do that for a couple of numbers. See if you see some sort of pattern. pause the video if necessary. I'm going to pick up in about 5 seconds. Okay, so maybe you took your favorite number and you added 3 and you doubled the result and you subtracted 2 and then you divided that by 2 and you're like, huh, 7 became 9. And then you did it again with some other number, your favorite number like 11, and you added 3 and you doubled the result and you subtracted 2 and you divided that result by 2 and you're like, huh, 11 became 13. Well, I wonder if this whole process just adds 2 every time. 7 becomes 9, 11 becomes 13. Can we use variables to help us out? Well, sure, because if we take a number, well, that number can be any number. So we'll call it n for any number. That was bad. I'm so sorry. So when we add 3, n becomes n plus 3. And then we double that result. And when we double that result, that becomes 2n plus 6. And then when we subtract 2, well, 6 subtract 2 is 4. And then we divide that result by 2, which means we divide each term by 2. And sure enough, the n that we started with becomes n plus 2. And so we can use variables to show a pattern, to generalize a pattern and say, yes, it really does. It's not just that we did 2 examples and they worked, it's that we have a generic way to describe what happens to any number under these circumstances. Okay, we'll do a second video in a moment on sequences and how those play into what we're doing with algebra. But that is enough for now. Hope this is helpful to you.